Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Miss T, or as many people like to also call me, Olu T. Hope you've been well. I have been reflecting quite a bit, especially as it is, Autism Awareness Month. And for some reason, I'm not seeing so much about it this year compared to last year, which is a bit odd. I don't know if it's just the state of life in the world at the moment, which is understandable. However, it is great to remember things that are closer to us or to some of us. And I especially wanted to do this series, especially within Autism Awareness Month, because I don't see too many people like me talking about it. And I think sometimes also people focus on maybe um, sort of different aspect of autism that maybe is a bit more challenging than others, physically, that is easier to document. But I wanted to share my story and my experience. And I say this because it isn't one that was quite obvious in the first place that it was autism or any form of neurodivergence like ADHD and so on. And so I thought to add my voice so that maybe someone out there who is wondering, who isn't sure, could at least stir up something for them to ask the questions to the professionals that they may be dealing with or that they need to start dealing with. So um, I don't want to make the videos too long, so I would record for as long as I can, and wherever I stop, I'll continue my next post. So hope that's okay. So my child is going to be 13 now, and I cannot tell you that I knew anything about autism until about 4 or 5 years ago. And the first time I heard about it was really, as in properly, when my son's primary school teacher in year 4 mentioned to me that she had some concerns. And she was like, it's not a problem. She just thinks he needs a bit more help. And she was going to speak to the head teacher at the time to, get things going in terms of should they be looking at an assessment for him. And sadly, that didn't happen. So it was just simply put down as a child just with late development needs, because for him, at the time, his academic development was sort of within expectations, but his social wasn't. And I think because it was more social, there wasn't so much focus on it. And this is within the school environment. Now, at home, I didn't know this as well. I didn't know about autism, definitely not culturally. Originally from Nigeria and Yoruba tribe, it's not something that we talk about. And the only exposure that I really had was to the one kid that I knew that had cerebral palsy. So nothing really that could make me go, okay, this is something to look out for. So when I didn't hear anything from the teacher in year 4, just assumed it was all fine and it was just a social bit. Now, as a parent, I pretty much, and not just myself, even family members, people around, put it down to maybe it's just the way he is. And the way that phrase wasn't, like what made me even more comfortable with that phrase was because when he was actually in nursery, they had said, they were concerned with his speech development, because it wasn't like forming the words, it wasn't clear. It's now when I look back at videos from 10, 12, 13, not 13, but kind of 12 years ago, I'm like, oh, so this is what the signs were. And at the time when he was in nursery, we were referred to the speech and language therapy in the borough or county that we lived before in the UK. And we went for the assessment or appointment, and they did a couple of checks, and the lady put it down to, oh, he's just taking his time. And her rationale was when you called his name, he answered. Um, and to her, it was just one of those kids that just developed later and that was just choosing to not engage in the way that they expected him to. But never said anything about possibility of autism, never shared anything about what to look out for, just in terms of, future if you had to go back. So whenever anybody made a comment as to, oh, maybe, I'm like, well, we've gone to speech and language, the other professionals, and they said he's just one of those late starters. And that's how we kept it. And when he got into reception, primary school, the first couple of years, he had a support plan because they just put it down to he just needed extra support. And what he struggled with the most, even from like reception year one, year two, were words. He would struggle with spelling them. And if he did spell them, sometimes the words would be the other way around and so on. Um, there were things that he would do, anyone that knows us and knows my son, he was crazy about trains, Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends. My goodness, we spent a good amount of money just buying things that were Thomas and Tank Engine and all his friends as well. And my son had a particular way of organizing stuff. He would create structures and build bridges using any and everything. And I used to just be like, oh, that's the engineer in the making. We're going to make, that's the direction. He's clearly someone who sees structures, who likes to be involved. And even when I did DIY at home, he always wanted to be like, he was really involved and interested in things that related to building, things like Lego. Um, and he would just try and put it all together. And oftentimes he would do it without any direction. He would just figure it out. So we just put it down to he's just a smart kid. We call him an old soul because he would do things that just seemed in action to be beyond his years. He might not say anything to you. He might recall, and this is where the social part is, things that we culturally would say he's being rude because maybe he's not responding, or you call him, he refuses to engage, and didn't really think anything. When I used to get frustrated as a parent because I'm like, it's me, the mom, who they're going to think isn't raising her kid well. um never really tied it in that these were signs, not maybe as obvious, but these were all little signs that if you put them together was telling the story that this kid had autism traits and would need some support. Um, and by the time he was in year three, we had to move. So we moved to a completely different county, and which was down to a divorce. And so when things were happening after that, of course, myself and the school initially thought it was the whole move, completely new. And it was during COVID, we moved online school. So it was down to there's a lot of changes that the poor guy had been through. No one again at the time initially thought about autism in any way, shape, or form. So it wasn't familiar, didn't have anything to use as a guide, didn't really know anyone who, at the time as well, had any autistic kid that was around, or that, it just wasn't a conversation. So for a long time, he didn't have the best support or the right support that he needed. And it wasn't only until year fives when they started to do mocks for things like SATs, which they would do in their year six, that things really started to change. And that's when we really started to see the big changes. And he went from doing well academically to it was like there was a swap. And it became he was sort of getting better with social. He was starting to have friends. I'm talking around, age 9, 10, it was when he really started to have a friend in school that he would speak to. But even then was still a struggle. Even when we had birthday parties, he didn't want to have anybody around. He didn't want anybody touching his stuff. Again, we had put it down to the fact that he was an only child. So maybe he was just used to having his own stuff. Never again realized that it was or a lot of sensory stuff that was going on. So things like noise. And if you've ever been to an Owambe party, a Nigerian party, you know the venues can be extra loud. Even if you just go to church, even like the speakers and everything is like it can be quite loud, within the environment. So he would cover his ears if something was too loud. He would be listening to something, and even I'm like, are you sure you're hearing anything? And it's like, yeah, it's very loud. And I'll listen to it and I can barely hear it. So of course you then start to think, is it hearing? Is it something else? Hmm. All of that was happening, and then SATs and the mock for SATs started to really show that he was struggling. And I so thankful to God that that time was when the school got a new SEND officer, so SENCO, so special education needs, I believe it's coordinator for his school in primary. And even though I don't really like to put race or anything, she was mixed. Well, she looked mixed, or she just really light skin. So I think she had the understanding of culture and was able to have a chat with me that basically tied in culture and what was going on and how this could be mixed, which was really helpful because I'd never really looked at it in that space. But her knowledge helped a lot in me actually knowing what was going on and to kickstart things. And it's again why, in my way, I guess I'm paying it forward, just in case there's someone like me, color, maybe even single mom, who is walking this journey and they just need some guidance or just to know somebody else's experience. So, anywho, this lady, amazing woman, she took it upon herself to make sure that some assessments were done. She gave me all the resources, people to contact where she couldn't do it herself, with the local council, educational psychologists, well, EP, they call them for short. And this was how we were able to get stuff rolling, and started to understand my son a little bit better and understand that the things that I thought were misbehaviors were actually or was actually dysregulation, and he was just triggered, and that was a result. When even through this process, when everything started at school, he was starting to have behavioral issues where even the head teacher at the time didn't want to even believe still that there was more going on. And he just said, well, he knows the difference between right or wrong, therefore it can't be autism. And that's another thing, sadly, that a lot of young boys um seem to get, oh, it's just bad behavior. It's not always just bad behavior. There could be a lot more going on, and I'm talking across different races and so on. It's not peculiar to one. I think boys in particular, um get pegged as being bad. um Girls, maybe because we are more emotional, I suppose we mask better. So I suppose if for the girls it's even a lot harder to even identify, because you could just say she's, the girl's been moody, she's been overly sensitive. So these are some of the things that could tell that there's more going on, and for you to then investigate further. It doesn't mean that it's autism, but there's no harm in checking if it's autism related, if it's ADHD, or even if it's autism and ADHD, which is the AUDHD for short. So um, this Senko basically was the person that God put in place to help us. I'm sure she helped other people, but at a time where even I was still transitioning from, the whole move as well myself, and balancing work and looking after the kid and just everything. It was hard, to be getting calls from the school about behavior, and then having to drive to the school, like leave work and quickly go to the school to like what's happening, and just for me to talk to my son and try to calm him down. So these were going on, I mean, there were times that it would be so bad, he's hitting his head, he's tearing off books, he's instead of doing his schoolwork, he's making origamis, doing creative stuff. There were some images that were pretty dark as well that he would draw, and he's drawing himself in really dark visuals. So yeah, a lot of worrying times, a lot of tears, because I myself was like, I have no idea what's going on, but also that I felt alone in those times because I didn't really know who to speak to. And I remember when I started sharing my WhatsApp status, just about posts that I was seeing. So I started following people that were sharing their autism journey, as parents. A lot of them were mostly from America. Again, didn't see too much from the UK. But I did follow some pages, some families that gave me some insight. And I started to watch their posts, and I started to realize, okay, maybe, these are the questions I need to ask, these are the things I need to do. And that also helped me in my conversations with the Senko, but also in terms of the school in general. And also when it came to speaking to, the medical professional in trying to get appointments and trying to get him seen. But also talking to like child and mental health services, so CAMS. So basically, it was a whole lot of back and forth, different services, trying to get to the bottom of what was happening with my son, and how best to help him, especially because he wouldn't talk to anyone, he wouldn't engage. So even when the educational psychologist went to the school, he wouldn't engage, but thankfully he would. When she brought out photos and stuff, she was able to communicate with him that way, because then he would maybe nod his head, or he will point to a picture if it was like a set of pictures and so on. So that was when, in the report, that was quite disheartening to read, because you're seeing things like depression, even anxiety. And I was like, what? Like, how's my kid that he's going through all of this? And I'm talking, he was 9, 10 years old when we started to get the reports in. And I guess thankfully the school also had a special needs school attached to it. So they reached out to that part of the school in terms of their assessors, and they also confirmed things around selective mutism, which basically is the kid chooses when he's going to speak, because that was what was happening a lot. And it made a whole lot of sense what was happening in his younger years, where he basically would not say a word if he didn't, if he was uncomfortable or something like that. He would just select, you just be quiet. And we used to play, everybody play, oh, he's so quiet, he's so gentle, not knowing that he was actually internally dysregulated. He still is quite internal with a lot of his emotions. So it was quite, yeah, a challenge, definitely trying to get the answers to questions. But I'm so grateful because, yeah, I would say prayer and God's favor, definitely. My faith has to always enter the conversation. It's just how I'm able to get through the day to day, and I hope it encourages someone. And that's how we got through, and we were able to sign up to, support services, had a great session also with um, Enfold Charity, um, which really, in fact, I think that because I had like about 6 or 7 sessions, that I would recommend to any parent to see if you can be referred to Enfold Charity. I don't know if they work with every council, but they work with our local council. And it was so helpful because the person that was assigned to us is also autistic, also male, and he was able to share his own personal experience and how he also struggled sort of moving, the transition from primary to secondary, and just his general struggles and things that still trigger him even as an adult. But for me, it was great to see this person and him sharing his experience, because it gave me hope that my son too can grow up and achieve, whatever he wants to achieve, including get married, have a kid, because this is what this gentleman, he had a baby. And he went through sort of how to, do like a questionnaire and stuff, in one of our sessions to identify like the sensory profile, and that made a huge amount of sense. And it really, it's like a light came on. A light came on and the darkness was dispelled. It really did help a lot to help understand my son. So my son's, he's, things like sound, things like touch, texture, even with clothes, like there's only certain clothes that he will wear, um, because of the feel on the body, and you have to remove tags and all this kind of stuff because it makes him really uncomfortable, even now that he's almost a teenager. Um, so so far that's been our journey. We are still on the journey. It's lifelong. What's the stage that I would say we're in now? Excuse me. I think the last 2 years have been more sort of the understanding of really how he is affected by autism, as well as knowing the strengths that he has, because it does come with strengths. They're very brilliant kids, or people, to take to factor in the adults as well. um Very smart. The way they think, their mind, I think, is brilliant, and you know that's why innovations and just the way they analyze things are no surprise at all. There's certain jobs that they would just be perfect for. So the last 2.5 years particularly have been a lot of the sessions to learn, to understand, but also me as a parent to know, understand those triggers, say what works for us personally, because what works for me might not work for somebody else, but it's always good to try, which is exactly what I did. It's trial and error, see what's worked somewhere else and try it, see if it works, if it sticks. If it was a one-time thing, maybe just keep trying. Um, we are now at a stage where there's better understanding. I would say when a trigger is coming, I'm able to identify it quicker. I still have the days when I have to remind myself that you can't just parent, you can't parent the same way you were parented. Um, and you have to make those adjustments. So I'm not going to say it's easy. It definitely has its challenging times, but once you get a hang of what works, then I think it gets easier, less stressful for sure. So yeah, we are on the journey. He's in secondary school now. He's settled. His teachers have a better understanding of him. The school's very supportive, which I'm so thankful and grateful for. And they really are just making sure that they factor in, what they know of him and how he learns. And he's flourishing now. He's done so much better in the last few years now. I mean, I got the last school report and I just couldn't contain my joy. I was so proud of him, um, and how far he's come. And I just know he's gonna fly. Because with autism, it's a case of once you understand the different needs and understand the triggers, you walk around them, you adapt, right? And I'm also thankful that in this journey, and since when I started to be more open about it, more people have been asking questions. And then I found out I knew people who actually were experiencing this, but they were experiencing it so quietly. And I'm talking about people from my community. And I think it's so important, especially in not just in the Black community, but in the African community, that we really need to talk about things around mental health in all its various forms and shapes and ways. We have to open up and talk about them. I think it's the only way that we all get to flourish. We all get to learn how to support one another better. And we can just make, the world a little bit better, at least our part of the world. The world is quite big, but at least our little corner of the world, we can make a little bit better. And, just even on ourselves, be a little bit less stressful once we understand. So, um, yeah, I'll end it here, and I hope you sort of grasp the journey that we've been on, and how it was easy to miss that these were signs of autism. So food textures, only wanting one color of food, only wanting one thing for like 6 months straight, um, just the way they think, and all of that, and just different peculiarities. All I'm saying is observe, um, and then speak to someone, maybe informally, speak to your GP if you need to, just to get their opinion, their thoughts, or speak to the school. Or you could do independent assessment. They can be quite expensive, but and if you're one of the lucky ones that have friends who are maybe child therapists or psychologists, then please use your friendship. So yeah, or just ask somebody who knows somebody in your contact. You'll be amazed that there will be somebody who can help, or introduce you to somebody who can help. So yeah, again, I'll leave it here, and I'll see you in my next post where I talk about something quite sensitive. And I'm still thinking of how I'm gonna say that um, with that post, because it is really sensitive, and I'm talking about church hurt. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll see you in my next post. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, help this channel, watch the videos to the end. I probably should have said that at the beginning of the video, shouldn't I? But anyway, I hope to see you in my next video. Bye for now.